Hi, my name is Mary Erickson, and I am the Visitor Services Coordinator and Outreach Coordinator at the Danforth Art Museum in Framingham. And we are on 14 Vernon Street, right along Framingham Center Common. This is our new home since we were downtown, new since 2019. And today I have an artist. We're going to be in conversation, and her name is Raquel Fornasaro. And this is part of our Community Conversations Through Art program. And this came about thanks to the Framingham Cultural Council and the Mass Cultural Council. We have a grant to do 4 bilingual programs in Portuguese at the museum. This is the first we've done this, so we're really excited. So Raquel Fornasaro is the artist today. She's a Brazilian artist, and she's here to tell you more about herself. So welcome, Raquel.
Thank you, Mary. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for inviting me to this wonderful show at the museum. I'm very excited. I know the Brazilian community in Framingham is quite broad, so it's really good to be part of it.
Good. Thank you for saying yes. I forgot to tell you how I met Raquel. It's the traditional now way of online Google search, looking for Brazilian artists who would be able to speak Portuguese, because our program is Raquel is going to speak in Portuguese the first hour and then in English the second hour. So we met through the way people meet for dating.
It's all online nowadays.
Yeah, exactly. So tell us a little bit about your story.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in Brazil, in São Paulo specifically. I moved here after graduating from college in Brazil. My background is in marketing and advertising. So I had a few years of work in Brazil in the area, but I always kind of knew that I wanted to be an artist. And Brazil, at least the situation that I had there, it was really not conducive to go into that area. Although advertising was really fun to work with, it wasn't really quite what I wanted to do.
No, can I stop you for a minute? It wasn't conducive, like fine art programs weren't a part of the university you were in? Is that why you didn't do fine art, or was it just not encouraged?
It was both.
Okay.
Yes, I did not have the encouragement from the family. Art just as usually is not the career that the parents really
correct. Yes,
want the
yes.
children to go towards. So advertising was one of those careers that I thought, oh, it's similar enough that it might be something fun to do, and it was really, really good. It was wonderful. I worked for about 4 years in graphic design and then some production for advertisement and TV. And I loved it, but it wasn't really something that I felt that was me. So when I had the opportunity, the plan was to come to the US, learn a little bit of English. I'm also an Italian citizen. So after the US, I was about to hop to Italy, and then there, right, the place for art. That was the plan, to stay there and really, in the area, really go to schools and really immerse myself in art. But as many immigrant stories go, I met someone that I fell in love with, and here I am, a family later.
I didn't know that. Did you intend to stay in the U.S. like a few months, and then Italy was going to be your long term?
Yes, yeah. It was about the plan was about 2 years here, 1 year and a half, 2 years, just really get some money, learn another language, and got to Europe. But odds are that I fell in love with this Brazilian guy from São Paulo that I met here.
Right.
And here I am. Yeah, not planned, but since I was here, I decided that I got to follow at least one part of my plan.
Right.
So I took 2 years at the Corcoran Museum School in Washington, D.C., which was a lovely experience. And
you moved down there.
I moved down there.
Okay.
I did 2 years there at the school. And after that, I started a family. So a few years later, I definitely find, I was doing art on and off in between after, but about 12 years ago was when I really decided, okay, this can be a career. I'm gonna really immerse myself fully in it. And I started just fully creating art and nothing else.
You know what, Raquel, that's really, you did that at a time when you then had little children.
I had little
That's
children.
really
Yeah.
brave, or to be able to make the time then.
I would say maddening sometimes. So it was really, in the beginning, it was really on and off. I was a full-time mom. On the side, I have a canvas, and whenever the kids were asleep or I had some extra time, I would just go and paint. Occasionally, I would forget a crayon next to the canvas, and I would go back and they helped me.
Right.
Which was lovely, but
Oh, that's fun.
But that was the moment that I actually went back to my graphic design life and I started creating digital art. I realized I love painting. That's really my to-go medium. But with little kids, it was very difficult. I didn't have hours to sit in front of the canvas and dedicate on a painting. And with graphic design, with anything that is digital, I would just use a lot of Photoshop. So I would do photograph, go on Photoshop, and the computer you can close at any time and come back and you have the exact
They don't have
same
a crayon
thing.
on it.
That's, yeah.
Yeah.
So for about 3 years, I just did digital art mostly. I had some paintings going, but it was about one painting a year. Graphics, anything that it's digital is just so quick and easy that was a really fun part. And I actually never stepped back fully from the digital part. I still, up to today, I do a lot of digital images and the paintings also. I usually start with photographs, go on Photoshop, play around with Photoshop for a little while. Then I move to the canvas and paint. So
Is that sort of like your sketch? Is you're
Yes.
playing in Photoshop? That's
yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, I use no pen and paper anymore, very rarely. I do all the sketching now on Photoshop. And very recently, with the advent of AI, I really enjoy playing with AI because now I can even skip the photographing and manipulating image part if I do want to. I can just describe something to the tool, and it's a little bit of a game. You give AI prompts, and it doesn't really quite understand all the time what you want to say. And English being the second language, I feel that sometimes my grammar is not as correct as the AI
Your
is
grammar's
accustomed. But it's an interesting game because you're describing something that you have in your mind and you see whatever the computer is going to bring it back to you.
Now, I'm going to slow that down a minute because I'm not someone who knows AI. So what would be a prompt? Like, make something that is, like, what would something you would tell AI?
Yeah, so for instance, one easy example, the latest work that I did for the Umbrella Art Center is a sculpture. So before, I did some sketches by hand, so I knew exactly what I wanted to do because I'm basing the sculpture on a scientist's concept.
Okay.
So the concept exists and I'm making an imagery out of that.
Okay.
So I went to the AI and I described it. In this instance, it's a bathtub.
Oh.
So I described it, a bathtub made with willow branches.
Oh.
And I wanted a faucet, I wanted some plants and some grass around it. So I describe as best as I can the lighting, what the angle that I want to see the bathtub. If I want a realistic image, a steampunk image, you can do as much or as little detail as you want.
And this is from scratch, Raquel. Like, I was picturing you had a photo, like one of your photographs, and you were going to create a painting and you told it to do something like that. This is from scratch. That's wild.
Yeah. So you just really, or in a simplistic way, you can say, give me a cat in a feather hat.
Yeah.
And it will just come. But if you do something that it's simple, you really have no control on what is going to give back to you. But if you really know what you want and you can describe it well, it came out something that I had, it was exactly what I had in my mind. So I did send to the museum that image, that sketch, AI generated, and now I built the sculpture, which doesn't look exactly like the sketches. Of course, I would love to, but it's exactly what I imagined.
With your hands, and what medium for the sculpture?
Yeah. So the sculpture is, I collected some branches from a pine tree that had recently fallen, and I weaved them together. And it's a life size. It's a 5x3 bathtub, so it's quite big. And I planted stuff in between the branches. So it's an interesting visual. In about a month, we'll see in its place.
I was going to say, I don't think I saw that in the works when I visited your studio. Okay.
That's not out there yet, but very soon.
Well, this is a good lead-in to talk about how your work is environmental usually, that you're an environmental, someone who cares about the environment, whether you consider yourself an artist activist or not. But do you want to talk about what's behind your art?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm an activist, but I'm certainly an environmentalist. What I try with my art, and maybe not try, my aim is to put some of my own feelings, and I think the feelings that we all have, of the things that are going on and we know that we have to take care of, and the things that are wrong. And I try to put that in a visual form, in a way that maybe hopefully will affect people emotionally and will lead them to some certain action.
Okay.
So if that does happen, or if it has an effect, or how long that effect is, I really don't know how to calculate that. But everything that I create has some background related to ecology. So even if it's the living in the city and our disconnect to nature, or the way that we treat nature and the animals that live within us, it's all, even if it's the digital painting, sculptures, they're all framed around the environmental art mindset.
Okay. I'm thinking of a painting that I saw in your studio that was also on the cover of Artscope magazine with the turtles. And can you tell them the story about that? Because I think that was so fun, colorful, happy, but the message was so sad.
Yeah.
It was a very interesting painting, and very large too. I think that the scope of Raquel's paintings, they're beautiful and they're big, and do you want to talk a little bit about that one?
Sure. Yeah. Some of them are slightly bigger. Interestingly enough, the bigger they are, the easier it feels. They're not too big. Some painters really go out there. My studio is in my home, so it does limit the space. With that painting, I had a year prior, I had visited this island in Brazil, in the the northeast of Brazil, so of the coast. And it's absolutely gorgeous place, and it's a reserve. It's very limited for you to come and visit. You have to pay extra fees. You have a certain limited amount of time that you can be in the island. And I was there with my family. Again, the place is gorgeous, absolutely an utopic visual. But as you're walking on the streets, you still see some trash, and a lot of it, they do have a small population, but a lot of the garbage, especially at the ocean, at the shoreline, they're really not from the islanders. So you realize that whatever actions we take anywhere in the world, whatever trash, garbage we produce, it is affecting somehow some other place. And now we're a lot more aware than we were before. But actually having the opportunity to walk at a place that should be idyllic, should be separated from all those troubles from the rest of the world, and seeing that it's not, it was really something that touched us a lot. Another thing, they have this program called Tamar, and the inspiration from that painting came directly from that program. The Tamar program is a program that takes care of the turtles. So I don't remember what is an acronym from, but they started trying to restore some species of turtles that were close to being extinct. The program is about 50 years old, and one of the great things that they have at the island is a museum. They have some programs where they have the kids coming and you can see them tagging the turtles and doing all the measurements that they need to see if the turtle is healthy. And in one of those talks, they talked about a lot actually about how many of the turtles and other animals that wash ashore dead, when they go and try to understand why were they dead, they often in times, if not 100% of times, they find plastics inside them. So that was something that I could just keep not out of my mind. And that painting was just fully that. So the painting, if I try to describe it a little more, it's 4 children and they are at the beach. They each have a turtle mask on, and they're in a plateau, almost like performing a play. So the thought behind it was that the children, they're showing us what we're doing. All around them is just garbage and some elements of trash that I did find on the beach. And each one of those kids, they represent a turtle that I remember seeing a picture or a video of some of those animals being harmed by human waste. So one of them, it's all tangled in fishing net. The other one has straws in their hand, which infamously there was this turtle that got hurt by straw. So all of them really passing that message that the place is amazing, but we do need to take care and understand what we're doing with Earth, and we're not affecting only human life. We're affecting plants and animals and all the landscapes around the world.
I just love that. I'm an animal lover too, but I love that story, and I love turtles. I loved snorkeling with sea turtles the time that I have, and they're so beautiful. So thanks for sharing that. I love your heart. I love how your heart is so in your work. I mean, and you describe it as, I think from our prior talk and now, like you can't unsee it, and it just comes out naturally. It's the bleeding heart. That's your nature, kind of.
Yeah. Usually with art, what happens a lot to me, I do see or I read something, and that really, with all of us, right? It stays with us. And I need something, if you're a writer, you write a novel, you write a story. For me, my way of communicating my feelings is through art. And through that communication, I do want people to feel somewhat in the way I feel, and really to be moved and to change their attitudes, even if it's just a little bit, to really understand that everything is cyclical and we need a more circular economy. We need to understand what we're using and how we're using and how much we produce, and do we really need to buy that many things? Do we really need that big of a car? And it's all things that capitalism moves us to want more, but we're understanding now a little more. We always knew capitalism, and not that any of the isms are perfect. Capitalism is not perfect. None of the others are.
Right. I like that, the isms. Yeah.
Yeah. None of them are ideal, but there are ways that we can make it better.
Right. Right. Well, I do remember when I was in Julia's studio at home in Newton, she has these big balls that are like, they remind me of, they're chair balls, really, that I don't know what you call them, if they're yogi balls or what if you bought one, but she makes them with. To explain them, I do say that they're yoga balls just because of the size, but they're pure plastic. That is another background story from Brazil. My grandmother used to make those little balls to play with her grandchild, something that both of them, the baby and the 100-year-old grandmother, could carry around.
So she made those plastic balls. She would wrap them with some string, and she would play with them. And
So plastic bags.
Plastic bags.
The bags make the ball.
Yes, just the soft plastic bags. And I came back from Brazil and I decided, well, let's just start accumulating and see where that leads. And very quickly, I had a big ball. So I think in half year of accumulating only the soft plastics, single use, I had a good big size plastic ball. And I couldn't stop. Now I have 4 of them. 2 found a new home, and I'm making more. So now I started asking friends too, just instead of throwing out. Or we do oftentimes see at the grocery store that they have the collection for plastics. But I did learn also that those, they're not recycled.
You're going to break my heart.
I know.
Every time I go to recycle, that's what I think. And I take mine dutifully to the grocery store. I'm like, sometimes I see trash in there. I go, are they really recycling this? They don't.
It's the wish cycling. There's so many of those things that we just really wish, and you look at them and it feels like it should be easy to recycle. And that's where the way that we consume, it's the biggest and most important thing that I think we have. Yes.
Rather than relying on recycling.
Exactly.
But obviously this is a whole nother interview, but to change our consumption of like our bread coming in plastic, we can't change it. It has to change somewhere
from
else,
above.
Way from above. But the balls actually are really comfortable. They're great, and they're like modern art in the living room. They're really cool.
And I joke at home because at some point it feels like I may have sofas and tables because the amount of plastic it's so quick to accumulate. And what I've started doing, and my kids now, my husband, we all started doing, we wash the plastic. So if you buy something frozen, berries, they will come in a plastic bag, and all those things. A lot of times, who else is washing and really trying anything with them? And I just, every time that I have one of those bags, I just can't find myself just throwing them away. So it's possible to change attitudes. Is very difficult, but it's possible. A few weeks already, we had recycling bin coming out, but we didn't have trash. So we have the compost, and we don't really produce any garbage. We usually put the garbage out once every 2 or 3 weeks, which is it's a family of 4, so it's difficult.
That's significant.
And we could do better. We always have that in the back of my mind. We can do better. So through art, I'm trying to show people it is possible. It's not easy, but it's possible.
Right.
And one thing that we all have to be aware of is that it's not enough for 1 or 2 people, or just the consumers, or just the industries to do it.
Or just the artists.
It has to be a global thing.
Right.
And that's the part that shakes me a little bit, because often in times I don't see how that's possible, but we have to keep on trying.
We can't give up.
Yeah.
But I think even having your yoga ball chairs out there, that they found new homes, and that's starting another conversation in someone else's home.
Yeah.
To make people think, gosh, could I get less of this? Or
And even really pushing people, it's just if you feel like you need to get those plastics, maybe you yourself do a yoga ball. It's literally just putting plastic together. There's no magic to it.
Right.
Some tape, I try to minimize as much as I can. I don't want to add anything on.
Add more plastic.
Yes.
Right.
So it's really just mostly plastic, some tape, and then a film around it, and that's really it. It's just it's really, when I look at it, it's really what we consume.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. That's an example of, when I think of your art, I think of your paintings, but there was something, but you have sculptural elements to your art too. Like I'm trying to think of the one that people were swinging on in the studio that I saw online.
Yes, yeah.
I forgot, I don't know what.
I don't think I even had a title for that, but there was a show called The Art of Play.
Oh.
And that was that was created by Claudia Fix.
Okay.
And she did it at the Piano Craft Gallery in Boston. And the whole playfulness of art came to mind. So the balls are already quite playful. You can really sit, you can kick them around.
Right.
But what can you have that's more playful than a swing?
And did the swing have a ball on it?
You had a ball
Okay,
on
that's
it.
what it was.
So yeah, it's a swinging plastic ball.
Yeah. Well, in this video, I think it was online, or maybe I saw it on Instagram, adults were playing with us, so it was great to see adults play, because we need more play.
Yeah,
We're lucky we're artists, because we play with our art.
Absolutely.
But I think, well, actually, adults come to our Drop Into Art all the time, too. Like, we're getting more and more, a couple of adults come, not just young people with young families, because everyone needs to create.
We definitely need that outlet.
It's therapeutic, it's fun, it's joy, it's just a lot of good things. So that's very interesting. Well, one question that I asked Julia, the other artist in this series, Julia Checo, sorry, blanking. Anyway, is what do you want? I think you've kind of answered this, but what's the thing you want to people to take away when they see your art? What feeling, or what do you want them to?
I did tapped in a little bit on that, but there is a question that every time I create a piece, I do ask myself quite often while I'm doing it, and it's when you create art, a lot of times you're creating for yourself, right? It's something that
you need to do.
Yes, it's almost like a need. At the same time, you're not putting under your bed. You want people to see it, so why not? Art for art's sake is absolutely gorgeous. But since we're doing this, how about having an extra voice and sending a message? And one thing that really touched me ever since living in São Paulo was really the environmental effect. And it's something I like talking about. It's something I want people to understand more. So I really use this as a tool of learning, a tool of teaching people, and a hopeful tool at that. And hope is something in that subject that I really struggle at times. Sometimes reading the news, it's kind of difficult to feel that there is a possibility of betterment. But
Or being at a beautiful island and seeing all the trash. And that trash, Raquel, did that come from tourists, or did it come from the ocean from all over the world, do you think?
I think
both?
All of it.
It does, okay.
Yes, I'm pretty sure. So the island doesn't have a place for their trash, so they're very conscious of where they send. The tourists do bring some things, but the vast majority is just washed by the ocean. So you do see some of the elements that it's all hard plastics, tops of bottles and stuff of that kind that you really you don't know. The ocean currents really they bring things from and now we know about the island, right, of garbage and so the Pacific, I think. I bet that
I just learned about that like a year ago. People out there, if you don't know about it, what do they call it?
Garbage Island?
Garbage Island.
Yeah, something like that.
Way out in the Pacific, and it's bigger than Texas, or like it's huge.
It's huge.
And then we just dutifully go to our recycling places and hope that it turns into something, but it ends up a lot of it out there.
So I guess maybe to try to answer more directly your question, it's really the aim is really to bring a little bit of consciousness to people, to that when they're purchasing something, to really think twice. Do I really need to buy that? What effect is gonna have if I do? How can I change that purchase? What can we do in a more general way that will have a positive effect on the world?
I love that. I really love that. As I think about how basically it sounds like your love of creating and your love of the environment just naturally merged, but was there a time when your art, when you got started, wasn't about environmental? Like, did you then because I'm an artist who doesn't have that mission. I just paint happy things. And I sometimes think, oh, I should have a message, or I should have something that brings people agency, and I just don't. That's just not what I do. But did you consciously think I want to make a difference with my art, or did it just naturally happen? Does that make sense as a question?
It does.
Okay.
Yes, it absolutely does. And the answer is really not planned.
It just happened.
It's happened.
Okay.
And we oftentimes we paint, we communicate with the things that we know. Mm-hmm. In my background, living in São Paulo, my entire childhood was really seeing nature being destroyed. São Paulo is this incredibly gigantic city, and the way that it grows is just so undetermined and so ruthless towards the environment that it was just a sad affair to see trees that in one person's. So I moved from Brazil I was 24. So in 24 years, I can't tell you in amount of acres, but I can absolutely tell you that I saw so much destruction.
So trees outside of the city to expand the city?
Yes. Yeah, and it's just and even in the city, you look around and you go in São Paulo and there's a lot of green, but the city doesn't really give much space to anything else. It's really people, cars, and buildings. Now it seems that people are really trying to be a little more conscious, but the way that the government work and the constructions work, they just grow in a generic way. It's really building for the sake of having more homes, and it's based on destruction and nothing much more.
Now, Raquel, that would be like before you're 24, like were you sensitive to this? Were your parents aware of it and taught you, or did you literally just see?
No, I did grow up in a family that was very conscious about the area that I grew up before I was born was farmland. By the time that I was born, it was already a city. And now when I go back, it's just buildings. So from farm to homes to buildings in 40 years. I would imagine that it's a quick lifespan for some grow in that magnitude. One other thing that I grew up listening about was the river that we have in São Paulo. It's a river called Tietê. Mm-hmm. And Tietê and then transforms into Rio Pinheiros. Mm-hmm. And it's, I'm saying river, but I'm not sure if that's the right qualification anymore because it doesn't really quite flows. It's being so incredibly polluted. And my dad used to tell me stories of him swimming in that river when he was young. And now I'm thinking back, it's like he was probably not really healthy for him to do that then. But now it's absolutely impossible. There is no life in that river. It's foam and dirtiness.
And the government or nobody's up and clean it up like the Charles River
Not really.
Or something like that. It can't.
No. In 92, we had a Copa. I don't remember how exactly they call it, but they had an international community coming in and they gave a lot of money to São Paulo to clean the river. And what I remember studying in school about and the money and how it would be amazing and cleaning the river, and all they did was actually just cement the sides. So now it doesn't even look like a river anymore.
What was the purpose of that?
So it wouldn't flood in. So they dug the river deeper and they put cement.
So the
on
trash
the
wouldn't
side.
flood everything else, but it didn't clean the river.
They didn't even try to clean it, and I don't think I've never really heard of any serious.
Well, it's a city for tourism, though. You would think they'd want to be motivated.
It's a business city.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. It's not really.
So maybe Rio, where Julie is from, it's definitely more of a touristic environment.
Yeah.
São Paulo is just really business.
Okay.
There's not much to that.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
too
and
bad.
I don't want to bash too much in the city because there is a lot of good to it.
Yep.
But my experience as someone that grew concerned with the environment was really not positive because I saw too much destruction, and having the awareness of it, it's tough, it's difficult.
Yeah. Wow. Well, what are you working on now? Right? I mean, not this minute. You're talking to me. Or what do you have your sights on next?
Yeah.
If you can divulge.
Yeah, let's see. So I do have the work that I'm doing for the Umbrella Art Center in Concord, Massachusetts, which is really lovely. They're working on a project where they got some scientists and some artists to create something together.
Oh, yes. You mentioned this before. Yes.
So, and the focus for that, it's only environmental. So I'm working with a professor from MIT. He's a economics professor, and he's the person that created that bathtub concept.
Oh.
So to see if I can explain it a little. So it would be, imagine the earth as a bathtub, and we have an open faucet, and it's dumping CO2 into the atmosphere, and it's filling up. And we have one drain that it's the natural way that carbon dissolves into nature again, so back into the oceans, back into the soils. But that's not enough to drain the amount of CO2 we're producing and dumping back into the atmosphere. So his whole thing is we need to stop the production. We need to completely stop the adding CO2 to the atmosphere. Otherwise, there's really, I don't want to say no hope, but it might be a way more difficult prospect to save the world.
I think it's fair to say no hope if people don't pay attention.
Yeah.
Really, I don't know. I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but did you think this professor made this concept just so people would get it more? Like
Yes.
Because it's a pretty basic concept, but it's like, it's simple. You know.
But that's exactly it. I think what he saw was that people at MIT, students at MIT, and he's teaching graduate students, they would not really quite grasp the concept of that flow, of things being connected to the point that you have to maneuver around too many spots to have everything happening at the same in the same rate. So I think what he saw is that people thought, oh, if we do this one thing, that might not happen, or it will help in another way. And he's saying, no, we need to do all of it. Otherwise, it's no game.
Well, and it also covers the mentality of people say, what difference does one can that I don't recycle, or what difference does my little piece of gum wrapper that I put on the ground or something? It doesn't matter. He's saying everything matters because everything adds to the bathtub. So a little bit can help from every person. That's my brain the way that
he's saying it's a holistic process.
Right.
So that's the concept that I attach to it, and I was lucky enough to come and watch a few of his classes. And one of the things he said that really stuck with me is that we should not be hopeless or desperate, because that really paralyzes people. But we should be afraid. And with that fear, with that fear, that's the positive attitude, because
propels action.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. And so are other artists working with that concept at the Umbrella program, or are you the only artist?
I don't know how many artists will be participating. I can surely say that it's 10.
Oh.
At least.
And 10? All with
all, yes. So I know there's someone working with a scientist at Beyond Meats.
Okay.
I'm with John Sturman. I don't really quite know the names of the others.
They're all with different artists.
All with different artists. So each artist got a scientist, and it's an interesting play. And if you think that scientists, they have a way of communicating that not often gets to everybody.
Right.
So with the same thing with John Sturman, having this simplistic way of talking about carbon, the way that they see is like if we have the artists somewhat translate what the scientists talking about,
Right.
maybe we can access some more emotional part of people and have them bring home more than the education.
A feeling.
A feeling.
So that is the whole goal of this
Yeah.
program at Umbrella
Yes.
Arts.
And it plays just perfectly with what I work with. All my art, ever since I started, it's all focused on
Did
that.
they find you?
Oh, on Google.
Oh, they did. Oh, thank you, Google. That's really, that's neat. Well, I'm going to bring a little personal into this because I'm remembering that, didn't you meet your husband at MIT? Was he a scientist there? Like, is this a marriage that's both real marriage and like science and Raquel?
Yeah, I did meet him at MIT, but he's not. He didn't go to MIT per se. He's often doing some classes and some activities there. At that time, he was helping organize a Latin American economics conference.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And I cannot tell you why I was there, but I was there.
Okay, so he's not a scientist. I
No,
forgot that.
but he's an
Okay.
engineer.
He's an engineer. So
Which
close.
is an interesting, yeah, he does help me a lot, especially when I'm building things. There's a lot of times that I need his help trying to figure out the mechanics
Right.
of one thing or
What's
another.
going to make it last, how to build
Yes.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. I like that marriage of minds too, the engineering and the art.
We balance. Yeah.
Right, right. That's awesome. What else can we talk about?
Yeah, maybe you can tell me a little more of the program that you guys are organizing at and how you did talk about the grant.
So the grant allows us to translate. We have two programs. One's the Drop Into Art that is going to be in Portuguese, and there will be Portuguese-speaking people there at the event to help people to do the project. But what Drop Into Art is people come into the museum and they look at one or two pieces of art that's on view and do an activity sheet, which is fun activity sheet. It's not academic, and it's for all ages, so little kids can do it with their parents, and they run around with a clipboard. And then I really love this program. And there's a little Drop in Art logo that will be at the piece in the museum, so they can go find it. And then they answer the questions, and then they go upstairs to the Danforth Art School and do a project that's related. So sometimes it's a sculpture, sometimes it's a painting, sometimes it's a print. It's all different. We have a really awesome learning engagement person, Catherine Taco Gerard, who came like a year ago and has really infused the Drop Into Art with all sorts of interesting projects. So we've always wanted to engage as much of the population in Framingham as we can, but we're realizing really the way to do it is to speak their primary language so they're comfortable, or their first language. It may or may not be their primary language now. So, so we found people around, just all different sources like finding you, who are going to come and be in the museum and welcome them so that they feel at home, and then help them if they need it. And then also up in the art school, there'll be people helping them. And so the hope is really, with doing these two community conversations through art with you and Julia, and these two drop-in arts, it's a pilot program, bilingual program, but we're really hoping to continue it. So I actually, Denora, you mentioned her, she was someone I reached out to about this spring, but she got back to me, and we're booking her in the fall.
Oh, that's
so
wonderful.
she's going to do a community conversations through art. So I think the community conversations through art isn't just, you know, last year it was, we had a person from Moldova and just someone from the LGBTQ community whose art had to do with that. Another one was a Mexican person who was an activist, proclaimed activist, and her art was all about that. So it's bringing all sorts of different people from our community, whether the community is, you know, a little further, like Newton, it doesn't have to be Framingham, their voices and having them be a part of the museum. So that's the whole idea, to bring more people. So if you have a Mexican artist, you're bringing in people more interested in that. And because we're a museum, obviously like every museum, we have a permanent collection of 3,700 pieces. So in our permanent collection gallery and sometimes in our hall, we show that work. But we'd love to show more work. And this is a way to do it. Like, tell people about your work, which is so important. So I think that answers your question. So I'm really, really excited about it because that's the first thing when I went to the Brazilian Center in Framingham. The first thing that Liliana said to me is, you need to have Portuguese-speaking people there if you want this large population of Framingham to come. Like, that's the first thing you need.
Framingham is an incredibly international city, and I was surprised to learn when I did a project with the Hearts in Framingham.
Yes.
And I was talking at the time was this Stephanie Duran, I think her last name. I might be.
I can't remember her last name.
Yeah, she's not with the Arts Council anymore, but
she's with the Metro West Tourism Bureau.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. She's a mover, and she gets things done.
And the work that she did was absolutely brilliant. She was able to get an indigenous artist. I think she had someone making a heart in Braille. She had myself and I think another 2 Brazilian artists doing the hearts. She was really
very conscious of who she chose. And what was the name, just for the viewers, what's the name of the project? The Heart?
One Culture, Many Hearts.
Oh, that's right. One Culture, Many Hearts. You can look on would it be the Framingham Cultural Council? Did they do it?
You know what? Oftentimes I don't want to push too much Google advertisement, but
just Google it.
If you Google One Culture, Many Hearts will definitely
because there were at least 25, if not, or no, 50 something.
It was all around. Maybe 30. Yeah, she had a good number of hearts, and you can still see them around.
They're all still up, and if you look. Google that, you'll find there's a map of where they all are. It's really great. It's a nice way to get around the city, and
they're all gorgeous, absolutely. And they're talking to the communities, they're talking to the city. I'm not living in Framingham, but it's a place that I constantly come whenever I need to buy something that it's from the Brazilian culture. They have a Brazilian grocery store, so it's a place that
when she came last time to visit me at the museum, she brought me yummy baked goods from, I'll let you tell the name of the place. Was it Padaria?
Padaria Brasil.
So in advertising this, I went there to give them the flyers, and they happily put them up, and I tried more.
Oh, that's lovely.
It was so lovely.
Yes.
So
that's the thing. So I really. It might be controversial, and I know that America is a difficult place when you deal with immigration. And let me rephrase that. Every single place is a difficult place when we have to deal with immigration. Doesn't matter which continent you are. Immigration is a difficult situation.
Well, and Brazil deals with immigration because there are a lot of there are Germans and Portuguese.
Yeah, and especially the recent immigrations, we have a lot of Venezuelans, a lot of Ethiopians that come by, and that start is a difficult thing. But at the same time, the immigrant is really kind of choosing to be there. So it's the person that really, people say, oh, they're destroying this, they're doing that, that's not so good. But the immigrant really loves the place, and that's why they're there. It's not by accident. You were choosing to be a place, and you're choosing to stay because you really like the place, you really like the culture,
or you
really like the people, or you fall in love. But even falling in love, right? That's very true.
You could have dragged your husband somewhere else. You could have dragged your husband to Europe, and you didn't. So you stayed.
Exactly. So. Yeah, because when you get to meet the people around, it's like, oh, I love those people. I love their culture. I don't like the weather so much, but everything else is so amazing.
It's so funny because when Julia was in the studio yesterday and we walked over, she was complaining about the New England weather because, you're used to warm.
Yes, the lack of sunlight.
Right.
And now we're having the eclipse.
Right.
I can't wait to come out and look at the eclipse. I think Massachusetts more than 90% of coverage, and it's so exciting. But every time I look outside, it's like, oh, but it's so cloudy. Will we be able to see any of it?
Right.
But yeah, no place is perfect.
Right.
We can just really find the good things and try to make them better.
Right. That's a good message to end on, I think.
Yes.
And making things better is what you're trying to do by giving people the agency and the desire from the feeling that when they see your art. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mary.
It's fun.